Morning, everybody. I am not feeling too well today, and I didn't want to get you all sick, so I am um, sending you this screencastify from my bed, where it's nice and cozy and comfy. I'm hoping I'll be back tomorrow, but in the meantime, I didn't want you to get too far behind. I know you would have rather me get behind, but we do have to get through some material. So, um, assuming I am back tomorrow, we will be going over your tests, and I'll show you your grades, and we'll grade your essays and all that good kind of stuff. In the meantime, I wanted to talk about our next unit, and remember, we're going back now to Unit 5. We had done 4A and 4B, and then we went to 6A, and now we're coming back to 5. And the rationale for that is there's a few reasons, but anyway, I won't go into them right now. But that's why, it looks like we're going backwards, and we sort of are, but there is a method to my madness. So we're going to start off with chapter 13, which is on meiosis. And we talked earlier about what mitosis was, and if you remember, mitosis is making of cells that are identical to each other. We want them the same in every way, shape, and form. And meiosis is going to be a little bit different in that we also want to produce new cells, but we want these cells to be different. And let me just, before I go too far, let me talk about a few vocab words. Um, Meiosis is the process of making new cells that are similar to but not identical to those of the parents. And so, if you look in classroom, one of the things, the essential question that I have posted in there is, why is it I don't look like my brothers and sisters, my biological brothers and sisters? And that has to do with this meiosis. And so we're going to talk about why it is that offspring may resemble their parents, but they may not necessarily, they're not going to look identical to them. And in some cases, you may not look like your biological parents at all. Heredity is just talking about when you transmit your genes, your traits, to the next generation. So your parents, they donated their genes to you, and you will donate yours if you have kids to the next generation. An important concept in all this is variation. So like I said, you're not identical to your parents or your siblings, and that's because of this meiosis. We look somewhat like our parents in some ways. We have some of the traits that our parents have. We don't have all of them. And then the last word that we need to talk about is genetics. And genetics is taking that heredity and that variation and putting it together and figuring out how it gets passed on from generation to generation. So in a literal sense, children do not inherit particular physical traits from their parents. They're actually inheriting the recipes or the genes that will code for a particular trait that then the kids will show. Um, so when we talk about genes, we've bandied this word around a lot. We haven't actually defined it as such. So we've already done DNA now. We know what DNA is. We know those are the A's, C's, T's, and G's. And we know that that code is going to, it's going to code for something. Genes are those codes, those recipes. So genes are units of heredity that are made up of A's, C's, T's, and G's. So they're made up of segments of DNA. And different genes will have different codes. So you'll have a different segment, a different sequence of those 4 letters. Those genes are going to be passed down to the next generation by way of these cells that are special cells, reproductive cells, that are called gametes. So these little guys here. So gametes are made up of sperm and egg. They're the only 2 kinds of reproductive cells you can have. Other cells that are not sperm and egg, say a liver cell, a heart cell, a skin cell, all of those are different from gametes, and those are what we call somatic cells. So this guy here, somatic cells. So Somatic cells are sometimes called body cells. In fact, you might hear me say body cells. Let's put that down here. Whereas gametes are just your sex cells. Now, the big difference, well, there's a couple differences, but one of the big differences in somatic cells and body cells is the number of chromosomes that they contain. So, body cells contain a total of 46 chromosomes in their nucleus. Every cell, every somatic cell that is going to have 46 chromosomes. Um, the last word down here that we should pay a little bit of attention to, and I don't want to have to spend too much time on it, is the idea that each gene has a specific location that you can find it on a specific chromosome, and that gene's location is called its locus. And so sometimes you hear this locus, and you also hear the word loci. And so loci is just plural. It just means you're talking about more than one gene and more than one gene location. Okay, so there are two forms of reproduction um, of organisms, and we're going to spend most of our time talking about sexual reproduction. But before we do that, let's talk about asexual for a little bit. Asexual is where there's only one individual, and that individual is passing on all of its genes to its offspring, and basically just an identical copy. So in asexual reproduction, you have a clone that should, in theory, be identically um, the same as they're identically the same. Okay, should be genetically the same as their parent. Okay, and they're just going to have one parent. In sexual reproduction, you've got two parents, and each parent is going to give a unique combination of genes that will result in an offspring that is anything but a clone. It's going to be very different from um, the parents in important ways. As we go on, we'll talk more about what that means for survival and um, evolution. But before we do that, some more information we need to understand. Um, like I said, we have 46 total chromosomes in our somatic cells. 46 total. However, think about this for a minute. Where did you get your chromosomes from? Okay, that's pretty standard, easily answered, right? You got some from your mom and some from your dad. Well, you actually got 23 from one parent, and you got 23 from your other parent. Okay, so we talk about 46 total chromosomes, but we're actually talking about having two sets or pairs. So you have a total of 23 pairs of chromosomes. Okay, I got one chromosome, chromosome number one from my mom, and I got one chromosome one from my dad. Okay, so I've got, and that would be one pair. I've got a total of 23 of those pairs. If I add that all up together, I'm going to have 46. Now, there is a test that you can do called a karyotype. And a karyotype is a way of displaying, taking all the chromosomes that are in a particular cell from an organism, could be human or otherwise, and displaying those pairs. So take the chromosome from your mom, take your chromosome from your dad, chromosome number one, and lining them up next to each other. And back in the day, they actually had to take a picture of all these chromosomes, and then they had to cut them out by hand and line them up next to each other and paste them down onto a document. And that was what we would call a karyotype. I'm going to go forward for a second and come back to this in a minute. So this is an example of a karyotype here. And if you notice, I've got a whole bunch of single lines. Um, this one here is showing, I've got a line here, and I've got a line here. This is a chromosome from mom. This is a chromosome from dad. Okay, so I have two chromosomes. Together, I have a pair of chromosomes. And the way the karyotypes work, they line them up from biggest to smallest. So this would be chromosome, and I go over that. That's chromosome number 1. And I gotta go really close to the screen to see if I can see this. Yeah, okay, this is chromosome set number 22 down there. Um, and let's see if I go back here and erase that. I'm just gonna erase the 22, maybe, because okay, that's 22 pairs, but I just said you had 23 pairs. So what's the other pair? And that other pair is going to be um, this guy here. Okay, and if you look close at it, it's kind of hard to see. But if you look close at it, one is big in this case, and one is small. And that's because one of these is an X chromosome, and one of these is a Y chromosome. If this was a karyotype for a biological female, then we would see two big lines like that. So it'd be X and X. Okay. So that 23rd pair is always down at the bottom in the right-hand corner for a karyotype. And that will tell you the biological sex for the particular karyotype for that particular person. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to go back to the previous slide. So, like I said, for every chromosome you have one from your mother, one from your father, biological mother and father, biological parents. Those two chromosomes are each in a pair, and they are called homologous chromosomes. So, chromosome 1, I got one chromosome from mom, one from dad. Together, those represent homologous chromosomes. Sometimes they're called homologs. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means that homologous chromosomes, or a homologous pair, um, they they're the same length, they're the same shape, and more importantly, they carry um, they carry the same genes that control the same inherited characteristics. So if you got one gene from your mom that codes for eye color on the first chromosome, I'm just making this up. This isn't actually the case. Um, excuse me, you would also get another homologous chromosome from dad that would also carry a gene for eye color. Okay, and every one of the genes on those homologous chromosomes would carry the same would carry information for the same traits. Now, it's important to understand that that doesn't mean that they're identical in what they code for. Okay, the recipes could be different, but they carry a gene for eye color. Okay, both genes carry um, both chromosomes carry the gene for eye color. One might code for blue eye, and one might code for brown eye. Now we'll come back to that because I know a lot of you are like, well, wait a minute, I have blue eyes and my parents have brown eyes. How could that be? Well, that's all part of genetics, and we will talk about that as we get into this stuff. But we'll hold on it for right now, and we'll go a little bit forward and talk about the sex chromosomes. So the sex chromosomes, like I said, on that karyotype, determine the sex and again biological sex of the individual, kind of what hormones are going to be produced, and what physical traits, physical parts are going to be produced. Now that again, that's biological sex. That doesn't have anything to do with gender identification. So I apologize if I offend anyone when I talk about. I try to be very careful with my language here. I'm talking always about male and female. I'm talking about biological sex. I'm not talking about gender identification. Those are different things. Um, so let's talk a little bit more about sex. If the if the child inherits an X from one parent and a Y from the other, then that will biologically be a male. And if you inherit two X's you're going to be biologically a female. Okay, so XX, you're going to be a female, and an X and a Y, you're going to be a biological male. Okay, so sex chromosomes are just XX or XY, and then those remaining pairs, we call those somatic chromosomes. We can also call those autosomes. Okay, so if you hear something that's talking about an autosome, you're talking about one of the 22 pairs of chromosomes that do not code for things related to biological sex. So they code for things like, does the fetus produce at some point testosterone? Does it produce estrogen? Are you going to see ovaries being made? Are you going to see testes being made? Okay, that's all the sex chromosomes. Autosomes are everything else. Okay. Um, so, in each pair of homologous chromosome, there is a chromosome that comes from each parent. So, like I said earlier, you get 23 homologous chromosomes from your one parent, and you get 23 homologous chromosomes from your other parent. Together, you combine those together, and you get a total of 46 chromosomes. And so that's what you would find in a human somatic cell. One set from one parent and one set from the other. When you have two sets of homologous chromosomes, we call that, the word is diploid, or 2N, so you have two sets of chromosomes. So for human beings, our diploid number is 46, meaning we have 23 pairs of homologous chromosomes, or a total of 46. In Oh, that isn't what I wanted to see. Where is that? Hold on a second. Okay, well, I don't know why it's not showing it, but let's just talk about it now, because that's silly not to. The other term related to this we need to understand is haploid. Haploid means you have one set, or you would have just N. Okay, so that would be 23 um, chromosomes. Okay, but you wouldn't have the pairs anymore. Now you just have one set of 23 chromosomes. Let me put chromo here. And I just realized as I'm writing these notes that you don't have the notes. So I'm going to put a note into Classroom about how to find the notes, because I've actually got them copied and ready for you. And you should be able to access those. So, sorry, I'm kind of talking to myself at this point. That's what happens when you start lecturing at 6:40 in the morning. In a cell in which DNA synthesis has occurred, each chromosome is replicated, and each replicated chromosome consists of two identical sisters. Okay, so what the heck does that mean? It means that, actually, let me see if this picture is better than what I'm going to draw. It probably is. Maybe not. Okay, so this will take me a second to draw here. Going into the cell cycle, going into interphase, you're going to see chromosomes that are single. They look something like that. I'm going to, for clarity's sake, I'm going to say this is chromosome number 1. Okay, and this is, make that black here. And this is, it's going to go through S. If you remember, when they go through S, they're going to copy their DNA. That's the whole unit that we just did. So what we're going to end up doing is we're going to take each one of those homologous chromosomes, and now that homologous chromosome is going to have a sister. Woohoo! I got a sister. Okay, so now there's two of them. These pieces of DNA are identical to each other. So they are identical sister chromatids. Okay, so they have all the same genes, exactly the same genes, not just coding for the same traits, but they have identical ACs, Ts, and Js. Okay, so it's just like you took a recipe and you copied it down word for word, onto a new note card. Same thing's going to happen for the other parent. I'm going to make another copy. I have 2 sisters here now. Okay. I still have 2 homologous chromosomes, but now instead of having beforehand, I didn't have any. Here, we say that there's no sisters, no sis, no sis. Sorry, but then when I go through S, there's gonna be 2 sisters. This is also gonna be 2 sisters. Okay, so that's after S. So after they go through S, they're gonna have 2 sisters. You still have homologous chromosomes, but you have 2 sisters for each homologous chromosome. And that is also shown in this picture. This is after S here, and notice how now I'm actually looking at. I think they've got 3 sets of chromosomes, right? Yeah. So they've got a total of 6 chromosomes. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So there's 6 chromosomes in this cell. So let's clear that out. And you can kind of tell which ones match up because these are longer. So those 2 are match sets, so we have called those homologous chromosomes. Notice how one is in blue and one is in red. That's to indicate one set coming from one parent and one set coming from the other. And also, if you look close at one of these, you see that they're actually, I'll try and draw it like they did. Oh, forget it. Let me try that again. So that's 2. There's 2 chromosomes there. There's one there, and there's one there. And we have, together we would have 2 sister chromatids. Okay. We have 2 sister chromatids. Okay. So 2 sisters here, 2 sisters here, as well as here, 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 and here. Okay. This is after. This is all happening after S. So this is happening after the S phase. Okay. I've duplicated all of the chromosomes, and now I have twice as much genetic information as I did before. Okay, this is the spot that they talk about haploid. Sorry, I missed that. So, unlike autosomes or somatic cells, a gamete, a sperm or an egg cell, is going to have only one set of chromosomes. And that is going to be called haploid because they only have N cells. For us, that number would be 23. We got 23 chromosomes, and that would make our haploid number 23. Each set of 23 consists of 22 autosomes and a single sex chromosome. Okay, as I showed you in that karyotype. Always, an unfertilized egg is going to have the sex chromosome of X. Okay? That's the only chromosome that egg cells or biological females can give. They have an X and they have another X. Okay, so they're X and they are X. So it doesn't matter which one you pick, it's always going to be an X. The sperm cell, on the other hand, can give an X or a Y because in a biological male, you have X and you have Y. So they could give the X or they could give the Y. Okay. So then the question becomes, a pretty easy one to answer at this point, who determines the sex of the child? And the answer to that's going to be the man, the biological male, that is. Okay. Whoever is carrying that X and Y will determine the sex of the child. It could be an X or it can be a Y. Now it's random. And it is that we are currently aware of, it is not a matter of, oh, well, in my family, I always have males. In my family, I always have biological females. It's totally random. Um, and you got to realize that you're dealing with a small population, a small sample size when somebody says, well, there's only boys in my family. Okay, well, okay. Um, how many did you have? Oh, I had three boys. Well, that just means you flipped a coin, and it came up tails 3 times. Okay, that's pretty easy to do, right? And that's what the X and the Y is. You flip a coin, you get an X. You flip a coin the other way, and you get a Y. Okay, so it's easy to get more than one, head in a row, or more than one X in a row. So, but if you look at the actual population at birth, there are an equal number of males and an equal number of females being born. Um, okay. Um, when two gametes come together, when the sperm comes together with the egg, that's called fertilization. Okay. And then once that happens, you go from having 23 um, and 23. So now I add them together, and now I have what we call a zygote, and that zygote is going to have 46 total chromosomes. Okay. Once that happens, that zygote will produce by mitosis, and so I start with 146, and I'm going to make another 246, and then I'm going to make another 246, and I'm going to make another 246, and I'm just going to continue that way, and that is how we go from fertilization to a zygote, to an actual embryo. It just keeps dividing and dividing and dividing by mitosis until you have an adult human being. Um, that's different from how those gametes are produced. And the gametes are going to be produced at, once sexual maturity is achieved. That's going to happen at, um, age 14, 16, somewhere in there. Um, you start producing sperm, or you start ovulating, and that ovulation is the start of menstruation. You're going to produce haploid gametes, and that's done by a method that is different from those somatic cells, and that is what we call meiosis rather than mitosis, which is another reason we separate these units, because the words just seem so similar to each other. We try and keep them away from each other so that they don't get confused as much by separating the units. Meiosis results in one set of chromosomes in each gamete. So we take the chromosome number, which are starting out as 46, and now, instead of getting 46, we're going to get cells that have 23 in them. Okay. And then those cells will go on to be to either fertilize or be fertilized by another cell that has another 23, and you'll go back to 46 total. I wish I was here for this picture, because this always I just think it's funny. Showing the whole cycle. So you start off with man and a woman, and they're going to produce cells by meiosis. And those cells are going to be haploid, right? They're going to have half. So they're each going to be 23. Either going to have egg or you're going to have sperm. And then these get together, they get put together, and then once you put those two together, you have, again, 46 chromosomes, but half of them came from mom and half of them came from dad. And now, rather than doing meiosis, now you're going to go through mitosis again. And you're going to produce large amounts of 46 chromosomes, which will end up being an adult human being. Gametes are the only haploid cells in animals. They're produced in meiosis, and they don't undergo any division after meiosis until fertilization. Once the gametes That's a sperm and an egg come together. They will form a diploid zygote. Okay, so now it's 2N rather than N. And that will divide by mitosis into an adult human being. Okay. That's really all I want to do today because that's all I'm really feeling like. Just go on here and see what we got. Yeah. I don't want to do meiosis until I hopefully get back tomorrow. Um, because that's got some excuse me parts in it that are kind of tough. So I'm gonna stop there. And I'm gonna have you work on your study guide, and I will post that in Classroom as well. And hopefully I'll see you tomorrow.